It's Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz, and we are joined today by Bill Monning. He is the Majority Leader of the California State Senate, representing parts of the beautiful central coast of California, including San Luis Obispo County, which in the midst of all the beauty, there is a nuclear power plant. I'm not commenting on whether it takes away from the beauty, but it's there. Tell us a bit about Diablo Canyon.
Well, Diablo Canyon is, as you mentioned, Brad, has been there for several decades now. It's one of the biggest employers in San Luis Obispo County, and it provides energy for the state grid. That said, at the time it was built, we didn't know as much about the seismic, potential seismic risks under and around Diablo Canyon.
That would be an understatement.
Right.
What we do know now, if I can interrupt, is there are a couple of faults that were recently discovered. Hosgri Fault.
Right.
It's pretty close to the plant.
Right. So my legislation, SB 657, seeks to extend an independent peer review committee, California-based, California composition, representatives of different state agencies, really scientific in nature, to provide an independent review of some of the seismic monitoring.
And let's back up just so our viewers understand. In the wake of what happened in Japan and otherwise, the Public Utilities Commission set up this independent committee.
That's right.
And I believe Supervisor Bruce Gibson of San Luis Obispo County has been on this committee.
He has.
Yeah.
He's been one of the county representatives. There's also representatives from the Coastal Commission, the Energy Commission, and others. But the focus is to review seismic data that's being developed by PG&E, that's the owner and operator of Diablo Canyon, which is regulated primarily by the National Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. Yet we as Californians have a vested interest, obviously, in health and safety. So in the wake of Fukushima and the absolute disaster there, the concern is to make sure that the continued operation of Diablo is done in a manner that could withstand seismic activity. So PG&E has initiated studies that they've submitted to the NRC. Those same studies are available for the independent commission to review as well.
But under the PUC review panel regulation, the panel contract expires at the end of this year.
That's correct.
And that's what you're looking to address.
Right.
You're looking to codify, actually, this panel into law as opposed to have it be part of PUC regulation.
Exactly. Well stated. So PUC established on its own authority and regulation the establishment. What we seek to do is through statute to codify, as you mentioned, in state law, the continuation of this oversight independent peer review committee to run simultaneous to the licensing of the reactors at Diablo, which would take us through August 26, 2025.
We are discussing this, and it's hard to ignore what's in the background. And what's in the background is the other nuclear power plant in our state, or the former nuclear power plant in our state, which is San Onofre in North San Diego County, which had really been iconic in many different ways, right off the freeway, and also provided a huge amount of energy for Southern California. Unconnected to earthquake issues, that power plant, I think, it's done.
It's done, but at huge cost to decommission it, and to safely put it in mothballs, so to speak. A tremendous economic impact on that community, and a hit on the energy grid. So one of the factors in looking at the contribution of nuclear energy in the state of California is that we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared both for health and safety issues, but also to have fallback plans in terms of energy needs, et cetera.
And I do want to go to that place about nuclear energy. I had mentioned to you, you know, in the 70s and 80s, nuclear power was seen as taboo. Diablo, if I can use that, it was devilish. You know, now many environmentalists are actually, at some level, in support of nuclear energy as part of the renewable solution because, look, it's green. It does not spin off greenhouse gases.
That's correct, but the one modification I think I would offer that makes it maybe not quite such a clean contrast, you're correct, it is clean burning in the sense that it does not produce greenhouse gas emissions that is our primary
Right.
concern in terms of trying to understand human impacts on climate change. That said, it does produce radioactive waste
Yes, it
that
does.
is highly toxic. And so one of our challenges when Diablo was licensed originally, it was with the idea and the promise and the license condition that radioactive waste would be moved off-site
Right.
to a place to be developed, which to date has not been developed. So it's all being kept in canisters there on site. So as long as there's no seismic incident, as long as there's no tragic release or meltdown, we're fine. But we do have to add into the calculus of so-called clean energy production what are the other potential health and safety risks. So it's not necessarily an absolute clean system. It does produce radioactive waste.
As you may remember, a few years ago, the California Coastal Commission was looking at a study and whether a certain study proposed by PG&E should progress. That ultimately was nixed because of concerns relating to sea life.
Right.
So how does that play into your proposal?
Right. Well, I think what you're referring to, the Coastal Commission actually required modifications of some of the ocean studies. PG&E was required by the NRC to do these seismic studies, both on land and in the ocean. The concern was potential adverse impacts to sea habitat based on some of the proposed study methods. So the methods were somewhat refined. We do have some studies that are currently being evaluated by the NRC that do constitute the ocean floor studies, basically sonar studies.
Right, and that was the problem. The sonar allegedly was so loud that it was going to disrupt the
And
sea
there was
life.
also some potential concerns of how the equipment was moved and dragged along the ocean floor, et cetera. But at least a first phase of those studies have been completed, and they are under review currently by the NRC. That same data is subject to review by this independent review commission. And from our point of view, this gives Californians, through California scientific experts, the ability to do their own review, offer their own review and conclusions that may or may not be identical to the NRC, or there may be some differences. And I think it's a matter of a public right to know. Let's make sure our best and brightest, representing different scientific groups and public entities in California, can also review that data and make sure the public is fully versed and that we have the ability to review not just an NRC conclusion, but let's look at how our experts are analyzing that data.
In the wake of what happened at San Bruno, which is also run by PG&E, there are some concerns about the corporate approach, if I may say, of PG&E, who was fined a huge sum for their purported misdeeds at San Bruno. Now, it was a different division. It dealt with gas and not nuclear power.
Right.
What are you hearing on the ground from your constituents about PG&E, at least as it relates to Diablo?
Right. Well, it's a mixed bag, I would say. Now, first of all, as you point out, in San Bruno, it wasn't purported. It was actually admitted, ultimately, of malfeasance by PG&E. It is a for-profit corporation. It has shareholders to whom those who administer PG&E assets are first and foremost accountable to. And yet, I think we can look at their strong commitment to public safety. It's not in their self-interest
clearly
to cut corners. That said, when you're dealing with nuclear energy and the production of nuclear power, there's very little margin for error. So it's probably one of the most regulated energy-producing facilities in the country, if not in the world. That said, we want to keep an eye on it.
His name is Bill Monning. He's the Majority Leader of the California State Senate. I'm Brad Palmer. It's from Sacramento. It's Local Edition.